I never finished a single fight in my life. Not one. What I finished were illusions. The illusion that strength overcomes intelligence. The illusion that tradition surpasses innovation. The illusion that we must accept the world as it's given to us. You think you know me, the fighter, the actor, the man caught between worlds. But these labels miss what I was truly seeking. I wasn't trying to bridge gaps between East and West. I was trying to expose the limitations of systems that fragment human potential. People speak of my physical achievements. Few understand that my body was simply the laboratory where I tested deeper truths. When I trained, I wasn't just developing muscle. I was discovering how artificial patterns limit natural expression. I didn't just develop a fighting system. I developed a way of seeing societal patterns that restrict human potential. Patterns so deeply embedded that most never question them. People mistake familiarity for necessity, conformity for reality. These patterns weren't merely concerning in my time. They've become catastrophic in yours. The distance between human potential and human reality grows wider each day, not because we lack capacity, but because the systems we've built increasingly work against our nature. Let me show you what I saw coming, not as prediction, but as warning, not for contemplation, but for action. The most dangerous crisis facing humanity isn't economic or environmental, it's expressive. Most people live their entire lives without experiencing honest self-expression, not even once. I discovered this first through movement. When I began training, I saw how people were trapped in forms, repeating patterns they'd been taught without understanding why. They called it tradition. I called it imprisonment. A martial artist performing memorized movements is no different from an office worker performing memorized tasks. Both are executing programs written by someone else. What I sought wasn't perfection of technique, but perfection of expression. The highest achievement isn't to execute a move flawlessly. It's to express yourself honestly through movement. This principle extends far beyond fighting. I developed something I never publicly named, but thought of as emotional computation. Consider this. Modern systems don't eliminate emotion. They quantify it, convert it to data, process it. You aren't encouraged to feel less. You're encouraged to feel according to metrics and frameworks that can be measured, compared, optimized. When you post online, the system doesn't ask, did you express yourself honestly? It counts likes, shares, engagement. It reduces your expression to computation. Your emotions become inputs in an algorithm designed to predict and modify your behavior. This isn't just happening online. It permeates education, where learning is reduced to test scores. It dominates careers, where contribution is reduced to performance metrics. It infiltrates relationships, where connection is increasingly gamified and quantified. Few understood what I meant by emotional content. It wasn't about being angry or passionate. It was about the quality of truth in your expression. When I struck, there was no calculation, no performance, no representation, only direct expression of intention into action. Complete unity between internal and external. I studied human biomechanics obsessively, not to imitate but to liberate. I filled notebooks analyzing how the body naturally wants to move versus how tradition forces it to move. I discovered that authentic movement follows principles, not patterns. The shoulder wants to rotate at a specific angle when the hip generates power. The elbow has an optimal position relative to the wrist when transferring force. These aren't techniques to memorize. They're truths to discover within your own body. Similarly, authentic living follows principles, not patterns. When you align with your nature rather than imposed forms, you discover efficiency, power, and expression previously inaccessible. Most people never experience this alignment. They've been trained to override their nature with artificial patterns. to prioritize external validation over internal truth, to value representation over substance, to perform rather than express. My training notes were filled with diagrams of muscle groups with arrows indicating force vectors, sketches of skeletal alignment, calculations of angular momentum. But these weren't just about fighting efficiency. They were explorations of honest expression through physical form, investigations into how the body communicates truth when freed from artificial constraint. The crisis deepens with each new technology that further mediates human expression. You're increasingly encouraged to express through filters, templates, formats, systems designed to normalize, commodify, and monetize your unique voice. When I said express yourself honestly, I wasn't offering motivational advice. I was identifying the fundamental purpose of human existence and the primary threat to that purpose. The modern world worships efficiency, yet misunderstands it completely. True efficiency isn't about doing more, it's about eliminating the unnecessary. I developed a principle I rarely discussed publicly: daily decrease, not daily increase. Most martial artists constantly added techniques to their arsenal, more forms, more styles, more options. I did the opposite. Each day, I sought to remove something: a hesitation, an unnecessary movement, a limiting belief, a redundant technique. My training journals were filled not with lists of what to practice, but with crossed-out movements I'd eliminated. I drew diagrams of punches with arrows indicating wasted motion to remove. I filmed myself moving and systematically eliminated everything that didn't serve essential function. This wasn't minimalism for aesthetic reasons. This was functional minimalism, the deliberate removal of anything that dilutes power, clarity, or purpose. The modern world has created a paradox: accumulation disguised as optimization. You're told to acquire more skills, more credentials, more connections, more options. But accumulation without elimination creates complexity, and complexity is the enemy of execution. It's mental friction, decision fatigue, paralysis through analysis. When I said the height of cultivation runs to simplicity, I wasn't offering a Zen platitude. I was describing the mathematical relationship between elimination and power. Power doesn't come from addition. It comes from subtraction of interference. Consider how I approached training. I didn't measure progress by how many hours I trained. I measured by the quality of presence in each moment of training. 10 minutes of complete presence outperforms 10 hours of distracted repetition. This isn't mystical, it's neurological. The brain forms stronger connections through intense focus than through mindless repetition. Most training systems failed to recognize this. They optimized for measurable variables: time spent, repetitions completed, techniques memorized, rather than the immeasurable quality of attention. But the immeasurable creates the results. The measurable merely tracks them. Now apply this beyond fighting. Modern systems measure productivity by quantity of output: hours worked, tasks completed. But these metrics miss what matters: clarity of purpose, depth of engagement, elimination of waste. They optimize the wrong variables. They count what's easy to count, not what truly counts. I see a society measuring efficiency in ways that guarantee inefficiency. Counting steps rather than asking if you're walking in the right direction. Measuring engagement rather than asking if the engagement has meaning. Tracking productivity rather than asking if what's produced has purpose. The deeper paradox is this: true efficiency often looks inefficient by conventional metrics. When I spent days simplifying a movement that already worked well, my training partners thought I was wasting time. They didn't understand that I wasn't trying to make the movement slightly better. I was trying to transform its fundamental nature by removing every trace of unnecessary effort. Similarly, taking time for deep reflection appears inefficient in a world that values constant action. Saying no to opportunities appears inefficient in a world that values accumulation. Mastering fundamentals appears inefficient in a world that values novelty. Real mastery doesn't come from collecting techniques, but from deep understanding of principles. I'd rather you master one punch completely than memorize 50 partially. I'd rather you deeply understand one principle than shallowly grasp 50 philosophies. This focus, this deliberate limitation of scope to enable unlimited depth, runs counter to modern impulses, yet contains the secret to true advancement. The ultimate efficiency paradox is that you achieve more by pursuing less, but with complete commitment to quality over quantity. The greatest disease of modern society isn't physical, but structural: fragmentation. Everywhere I looked, I saw division where there should be unity. Physical training separated from mental development. Intellectual pursuit divorced from emotional intelligence. Professional achievement disconnected from personal fulfillment. This wasn't natural. It was engineered. Systems of specialization create efficiency in parts while destroying the efficacy of the whole. You become excellent at your fragment while losing connection to the entirety. I refused this fragmentation in my own development. When other fighters trained only their bodies, I studied neuroanatomy. I filled notebooks with diagrams of neural pathways, tracking how thoughts become actions, how emotions affect physical performance. Not metaphorically, literally, chemically, electrically. I called this approach dynamic integration, the continuous fluid movement between different dimensions of development. Not balance. Balance is static. Integration is dynamic. It's active synthesis where each dimension informs and transforms the others. Consider how I trained. In a single session, I might move from explosive physical practice to writing philosophical insights, to studying scientific research, to meditating on emotional barriers. Not as separate activities, but as facets of the same investigation. This wasn't multitasking, it was multi-dimensional engagement with a unified purpose. I discovered something crucial. Development accelerates exponentially when these dimensions interact, rather than exist in isolation. Your physical training transforms when informed by neuroscience. Your emotional awareness deepens when connected to philosophical understanding. Your intellectual growth expands when embedded in physical experience. Modern society does the opposite. It accelerates specialization without integration. It treats speed as progress without asking if the parts are working together or against each other. It's like having a car where the engine gets more powerful while the steering becomes less responsive. The acceleration becomes dangerous rather than beneficial. My research on neural physical connections revealed that thought isn't separate from action. They're points on a continuum. When you think about movement, the same neural pathways activate as when you perform it. The distinction between mental and physical is artificial, a conceptual barrier that limits your potential. Similarly, emotions aren't separate from rationality. They're information systems communicating different types of intelligence. Suppressing emotion doesn't enhance rational thought. It removes critical data from your decision-making process. I studied anatomy not as a separate subject from philosophy, but as another perspective on the same reality. I analyzed muscle insertions and bone structures alongside Taoist principles of non-resistance. I examined nerve conduction alongside Buddhist concepts of interdependence, not to find parallels, to find a unified reality viewed from different angles. The most dangerous aspect of fragmentation is that it creates the illusion of wholeness. Specialists believe they're complete within their narrow domain. Institutions claim comprehensive knowledge while operating within self-referential frameworks. The fragmentation becomes invisible precisely because the fragments lose sight of the whole they're missing. Modern education exemplifies this perfectly, dividing knowledge into subjects, subjects into courses, courses into units, creating artificial boundaries that don't exist in reality. You learn chemistry separate from biology, separate from physics, separate from environmental science. Then wonder why you can't solve complex environmental problems that involve all these simultaneously. The integration imperative isn't about being well-rounded as a lifestyle choice. It's about being whole as an existential necessity. A fragmented human cannot solve the problems created by fragmented systems. Only integrated consciousness can navigate the complexity we now face. The ultimate warning is this: accelerating fragmented development doesn't lead to progress, it leads to collapse. Only by integrating dimensions of development can acceleration become sustainable rather than destructive. Traditionalists called me a heretic. Modernists called me a mystic. Both missed what I was actually doing, refusing to accept inherited limitations, whether ancient or contemporary. The most revolutionary act isn't rebellion against tradition. It's the refusal to let any external system, traditional or modern, dictate the terms of your existence. This is what I meant when I said, research your own experience. Absorb what is useful. Reject what is useless. Add what is specifically your own. I developed a principle I called contextual adaptation. The capacity to fit your approach to reality rather than trying to make reality conform to your approach. This isn't compromise. It's the highest form of pragmatism. It recognizes that reality is the ultimate authority, not methodology. When I abandoned classical martial arts forms, people thought I was rejecting tradition. I wasn't. I was refusing to let tradition become a prison. The original masters didn't develop their arts by following previous masters. They developed them by facing reality and responding authentically. To truly honor their spirit, you must do the same, even if that means departing from their forms. This applies far beyond fighting. Consider how institutions operate. They begin with a purpose, develop methods to serve that purpose, then gradually become more committed to preserving their methods than fulfilling their purpose. The means consume the ends. The institution survives while its function dies. Look at education systems designed for an industrial age, still operating in a digital one. Medical systems optimized for acute care, struggling with chronic conditions. Financial systems built for material scarcity, malfunctioning in an information economy. The forms persist while the function fades. I demonstrated this problem physically. When I pressured traditional martial artists, their beautiful forms collapsed. The movements that looked impressive in demonstrations failed under the pressure of reality. This wasn't because the originators of those arts were wrong. It was because their successors preserved the forms while losing sight of the function those forms were designed to serve. What made my approach different was broken rhythm, the deliberate disruption of expected patterns to create authentic response. In fighting, this meant changing tempo unpredictably, violating the conventional cadence of attack and defense. In life, it means questioning the rhythms that society imposes. Work patterns, thought patterns, relationship patterns, and finding those that actually serve your authentic development. Most people live in patterns they never chose. They wake, work, rest, and relate in rhythms inherited from parents, employers, institutions, and media. They never experience the liberation of discovering their natural rhythm, the cadence of existence that aligns with their unique nature rather than external expectations. Identity itself becomes rigid through this process. People define themselves through fixed categories, affiliations, and roles. They say, I am this, not that. creating boundaries that limit their development. Fluidity of identity isn't weakness or confusion. It's the prerequisite for growth. How can you become what you might be if you're too attached to what you currently are? The institutions that shape modern life demand this rigidity. They require you to be consistent, predictable, categorical, a reliable component in their systems. Your fluidity threatens their stability. Your authenticity disrupts their patterns. Your contextual adaptation reveals the inadequacy of their fixed responses. This is why authentic living feels revolutionary. It's not just personal development. It's a fundamental challenge to systems built on predictability and conformity. When you adapt to reality rather than convention, you expose the gap between what institutions claim to deliver and what they actually produce. The authenticity revolution isn't about finding yourself. It's about freeing yourself from inherited limitations so you can respond to reality directly, without the distorting filters of tradition or convention. It's about developing the courage to face what is, rather than what you've been told should be. This revolution begins with a simple question. Are your patterns serving your purpose? Or are you serving your patterns? When the answer becomes clear, authentic living becomes possible. The patterns I've identified aren't abstract social observations. They're diagnostic tools for your liberation. They reveal the invisible constraints that limit your development, not to discourage you, but to show you precisely what must be overcome. The honest expression crisis shows how systems convert your natural self-expression into computational inputs. The efficiency paradox reveals how accumulation disguised as optimization creates complexity that prevents power. The integration imperative demonstrates how fragmentation destroys the wholeness necessary for true development. The authenticity revolution illuminates how institutions preserve forms while abandoning function. These aren't philosophical curiosities. They're battlegrounds where your potential either thrives or dies. When I confronted similar patterns in martial arts, I didn't just criticize them. I developed practical methods to overcome them. I didn't just talk about honest expression. I demonstrated how to achieve it by removing barriers between intention and action. I didn't just theorize about efficiency. I showed how to eliminate unnecessary movement to generate maximum power with minimum effort. I didn't just conceptualize integration. I created training methods that unified physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual development. I didn't just critique rigid forms. I demonstrated contextual adaptation under pressure. You face these same challenges in modern life, but at scales and in contexts I never experienced. The patterns have accelerated, amplified, and embedded themselves more deeply in social structures. The distance between human potential and human reality has widened, but the principles for crossing that distance remain the same. Express honestly, not computationally. Subtract rather than add. Integrate rather than fragment. Adapt rather than conform. These aren't techniques to memorize. They're principles to embody in your own unique way. The specifics of application will differ for each person in each context. That's the point. Authentic development isn't standardized. It's individualized. Here's my final warning. Don't use what I've shared to create another rigid system. Don't quote me as an authority. Don't adopt my philosophy. The moment my insights become doctrine, they lose their power. They become another cage rather than a key to liberation. Instead, use what I've shared as a catalyst for your own discovery. Test these principles against your own experience. Refine them through your own practice. Transform them through your own understanding. The path forward isn't adopting someone else's truth, even mine. It's creating your own honest expression. That's not just personal development. It's the prerequisite for solving the complex problems we now face collectively. A society of authentic individuals, each expressing honestly, each removing rather than accumulating, each integrating rather than fragmenting, each adapting rather than conforming, creates possibilities that no existing system can imagine. That's not idealism, it's pragmatism at the highest level. It's recognizing that the old patterns have reached their limits. The way forward isn't refining those patterns, it's transcending them entirely. Don't follow my way, create your own. That's the only revolution that matters.